Let me paint you a picture of corporate insanity. It's 2015, and somewhere deep inside Ford's skunk works in Dearborn, engineers are doing something absolutely unthinkable. They're taking the new Mustang, America's most iconic muscle car, and they're giving it a crankshaft design stolen straight from Ferrari, 5.2 liters, 526 horsepower, and a redline that screams past 8,000 RPM. This is the Shelby GT350. The Mustang that told drag strips to go to hell, and aimed straight for Porsche's throat. Here's what you need to understand about Ford in 2015. They had a serious identity crisis on their hands. The Mustang had just gotten its first independent rear suspension, ever, after 50 years of live axle shenanigans. And suddenly, Ford's pony car could actually turn. But there was a problem, a German-shaped problem. The Porsche 911 GT3 was out there, embarrassing everything American on racetracks. And Ford's answer? The previous GT500 was a 600-plus horsepower sledgehammer, amazing in a straight line, completely lost on a road course. So Ford did something radical. Instead of adding more power, they added more revs. Instead of a supercharger, they added a flat-plane crankshaft. And instead of competing with Dodge's insane horsepower war, they decided to build a track weapon that could actually, turn. Ford engineers looked at Ferrari's playbook, studied it, and then said, yeah, we're doing that. But for $48,000 instead of $300,000. The heart of this madness is the Voodoo engine. 5.2 liters of naturally aspirated V8 Fury, with a flat-plane crankshaft that no American manufacturer had ever put into mass production before. 526 horsepower. 526 at 7,500 RPM and 429 pound-feet of torque. But here's the number that matters. 8250. That's the red line. 8,250 RPM in an American V8. Your grandpa's small block is crying somewhere. Now, for those of you wondering what a flat-plane crankshaft actually means, let me break it down. Traditional American V8s use a cross-plane crank, where the crank pins are arranged at 90-degree intervals. It's smooth. It's torquey. It sounds like a muscle car should. But the flat-plane design, where the pins are at 180 degrees, allows for better exhaust scavenging, higher revs, and a completely different sound. Ferrari has used this design for decades. Every modern Ferrari V8 screams because of it. And now, so does the GT350. Speaking of sound, let's talk about what happens when you floor this thing. Reviewers couldn't stop comparing it to Italian exotics. Car and Driver said it sounded like a Ferrari. Motor Trend said the same thing. That flat-plane crank creates a completely different exhaust note, more of a scream than a rumble. It's the kind of sound that makes pedestrians stop and stare, then Google whether Ford bought Ferrari when they weren't looking. Spoiler alert, they didn't. But they absolutely borrowed the homework. But here's what Ford doesn't put in the brochure. Flat-plane cranks come with a nasty side effect, secondary vibrations. See? Cross-plane V8s are inherently balanced. Flat-plane designs? Not so much. Ford had to engineer specific countermeasures, a dual-mass flywheel, special engine mounts, serious NVH work, just to keep the cabin from feeling like a massage chair. And even then, reviewers noted the vibrations. It's the price you pay for that Ferrari sound. Some call it character, others call it annoying. And here's where Ford really committed to the cause. The GT350 was offered with a manual transmission. Only. No automatic option. Not in 2016. Not in 2020. Never. A 6-speed Tremec TR3160, designed specifically for sustained track abuse. In an era where every manufacturer was killing the manual, Ford said, "You want a GT350? Learn to use your left foot." Absolute legends. Remember how I mentioned the S550 platform was the first Mustang with independent rear suspension? Well, the GT350 took that foundation and went absolutely crazy. If you optioned the track package in 2016, or bought any GT350 from 2017 onward, you got MagneRide adaptive dampers, a technology best known from the Corvette. Ford made the entire track package standard for 2017. partly because GM announced the Camaro SS1LE was coming. Massive Brembo brakes, 15.5 inches up front with 6-piston calipers, aluminum front knuckles, stiffer bushings everywhere. This wasn't a Mustang with some handling upgrades. This was a completely different animal wearing Mustang skin. Let that satisfying fact sink in for a moment. Ford, the company that gave us 50 years of live axle Mustangs, built a car with MagneRide, a flat plane crank, and a manual-only transmission for under $50,000. I'll wait while you process that. But wait, it gets even more ridiculous. Ford looked at the GT350 and said, "Not extreme enough." Enter the GT350R. The R deleted the air conditioning, deleted the radio, added carbon fiber wheels. The first mass-produced car to ever use them. Each wheel weighed just 18 pounds, versus 33 for the aluminum ones. That's 60 pounds of rotating mass. Gone. Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 tires, no back seat. This wasn't a street car anymore. This was a race car with license plates. The GT350R weighed in at 3655 pounds, about 105 pounds lighter than the standard car. Doesn't sound like much? Those carbon fiber wheels aren't just lighter. They're lighter where it matters, unsprung and rotating mass. Every engineer will tell you, 1 pound of rotating weight feels like 10 pounds of static weight. The R was sharper, quicker to respond, and absolutely brutal on a track. Now let's talk about something that made European manufacturers very nervous. The price. The base GT350 started at $47,795. Add the gas guzzler tax and destination. You're looking at just under 50 grand. Meanwhile, the Porsche 911 GT3, its natural competitor, $130,000. The GT350 delivered roughly 90% of the GT3 experience, for roughly 37% of the price. German executives were not happy. If you're enjoying watching Ford actually build something that handles, hit that subscribe button. We've got more stories of Detroit either getting it spectacularly right or hilariously wrong. And trust me, you'll want to be here for both. Now, some of you are screaming, what about the Camaro Z28? And you're right to ask. GM's track-focused 5th-gen monster, with its 7-liter LS7, was an absolute weapon in 2014 and 2015. But here's the thing. The Z28 was gone before the GT350 even arrived. Ford took that hardcore, naturally aspirated track day philosophy and ran with it. Now, GM didn't exactly sit around crying. They launched the 6th-gen Camaro SS1LE for 2017, 455 horsepower, MagneRide, Brembo brakes, for about $45,000, $3,000 less than the GT350. The rivalry was on. The philosophies were fascinating. The old Z28 was extreme. It famously deleted the air conditioning on the base model. The GT350 kept the AC, only the R went that hardcore. But the real magic was under the hood. Ford built the Voodoo with an all-aluminum block, and instead of heavy iron cylinder liners, they used a plasma-sprayed coating thinner than 2 human hairs. Saved 5 pounds right there. The Z28 made 505 horsepower from a massive 7-liter engine. Ford made 526 from a smaller 5.2, with each motor hand-built by a 2-person team at the Romeo Plant. They built about 2.5 engines per day, and signed every single one. Brute force versus artisan precision. And GM wasn't done. For 2018, they unleashed the ZL11LE, 650 supercharged horsepower, with Multimatic DSSV dampers borrowed from racing. That thing ran a 716 at the Nürburgring, faster than a Ferrari 488 GTB. While Ford went the purist route with a screaming naturally aspirated flat-plane V8, GM answered with brute supercharged force and chassis wizardry. Same goal, completely different paths. And then there was Dodge, doing something entirely different. They strapped a supercharger to a 6.2-liter Hemi and made 707 horsepower. The Challenger Hellcat was a nuclear weapon. Point it straight and destroy everything. But on a road course, the GT350 would eat it alive. 3 manufacturers, 3 philosophies, 1 incredible era for American performance. Speaking of track performance, let's talk lap times. The GT350R set a 1-minute 32.53-second lap at Laguna Seca. In the hands of Randy Pobst for Motor Trend. Quicker than a Porsche Cayman GT4. Quicker than a Corvette Stingray. And remember, this is a Mustang. A car that spent 50 years being a straight-line hero suddenly showing up at road courses and embarrassing European sports cars. The automotive world was genuinely shocked. On the street, the numbers were equally impressive. 0 to 60 in 4.1 seconds for the standard GT350, 3.9 for the R quarter mile and 12.4 at 117 miles per hour. These weren't supercar numbers, but they were fast. And unlike a 700 horsepower Hellcat, you could actually use this power on a twisty road without ending up in a ditch. But, and you knew this was coming, Ford didn't exactly nail the reliability. Some owners reported excessive oil consumption, a concern serious enough to prompt a class action investigation. And then there was the oil filter issue, and this one is wild. Ford actually issued Recall 17B04 because the oil filters on 2015 through 2017 models would come loose. Yes, the oil filter, falling off, on its own. You cannot make this stuff up. Ford built a Ferrari-sounding track monster, hand-signed by the builders who made it, and forgot to tighten the oil filter. Need a moment. The hits kept coming. In 2021, Ford issued another recall, 21B26, for timing chain tensioner issues on 2020 models. During assembly, some tensioners might not have been properly activated, which could lead to, catastrophic engine failure. The Voodoo engine was an engineering masterpiece, hand-signed by the builders who made it. But it was also apparently assembled by people who occasionally forgot important steps. But here's the thing, GT350 owners are obsessed with these cars. Despite the quirks, despite the recalls, the ownership experience created genuine fanatics. The forums are filled with people who've tracked their cars hundreds of times, who've put 60,000 miles on them, who consider them the best driving Mustang ever made. The problems were real, but so was the magic. Ford built approximately 23,574 GT350s across all years, including about 3,500 R models. This wasn't a limited edition. This was a real production car that real people could actually buy. Compare that to the Z28, which barely saw 2 model years before GM killed it. Ford committed to this vision and kept building it for 6 years. The very first ones, just 137 units for model year 2015, were anniversary specials celebrating 50 years since the original 1965 GT350. 100 regular GT350s and 37 GT350Rs. These cars are now worth serious money. Some 2015 R models have sold for over $200,000. Talk about an instant collectible. Ford kept improving the car throughout its run. 2017 brought the track package equipment as standard, including MagneRide. The 2019 models got revised suspension tuning and new wheel designs. The 2020 Heritage Edition came with special livery options honoring the original Shelby racing colors. And somehow, Ford resisted the urge to add a turbocharger or automatic transmission. The formula stayed pure, flat plane crank, manual gearbox, track focus, through the entire production run. And then, in 2020, the new GT500 arrived. 760 horsepower, supercharged, with a, gasp, dual-clutch automatic. Suddenly, the GT350 had a big brother again. But here's the beautiful thing. They served completely different purposes. The GT500 was the drag strip destroyer. The GT350 remained the track day purist's choice. 2 Shelbys, 2 philosophies, both legendary. The GT350 proved something important. American manufacturers could build world-class handling cars, not just straight-line missiles. The flat-plane Voodoo engine showed that Ford could think outside the box, could look at what Ferrari was doing and say, we can do that too. And the sales success, over 23,000 units, proved that enthusiasts actually wanted precision over brute force. Today, standard GT350s trade between $45,000 and $70,000 depending on year and condition. The R models, $65,000 to over $100,000. And those rare 2015 anniversary cars, try $200,000 plus. The market has spoken. The GT350 wasn't just a great car, it's becoming a collectible. Values have stabilized while many other modern performance cars continue depreciating. The industry noticed too. The Voodoo engine won Ward's 10 Best Engines for 2016. The car made Car and Driver's 10 Best list. Professional critics, the people who drive everything, consistently ranked it among the best drivers' cars regardless of price. Not best American car, best car, period. That's the kind of recognition that rarely comes to Detroit. The GT350 represented a philosophical shift at Ford. After decades of winning the horsepower war, Ford decided to win a different battle. Not most powerful, but best to drive. Not the biggest number, but the best experience. And they pulled it off with a $48,000 car that made Porsche owners genuinely nervous. This was Ford at its absolute best: competitive, creative, and committed. In an era of 700 horsepower monsters and autonomous driving, Ford built a car that demanded your attention, punished your mistakes, and rewarded your skill. Hand-built engines, manual transmission only, and it screamed like a Ferrari while doing it. Ask any GT350 owner what they think, and you'll see their eyes light up. Yes, the oil filter recall was embarrassing. Yes, the flat plane crank vibrates. Yes, the high-strung engine requires attention. But none of that matters when you're approaching 8,000 RPM on a back road and the Voodoo is screaming. This car created emotional connections that spreadsheets can't measure. Next time on Car Chronicles, we're looking at another track-focused legend that proved American manufacturers could compete with the best. Different decade, different approach, same obsessive attention to handling. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. The Shelby GT350 was never supposed to exist. American muscle cars weren't supposed to have flat plane cranks. Mustangs weren't supposed to chase Porsches on road courses. Ford wasn't supposed to delete the automatic option and force people to row their own gears. But Ford did all of it, built over 23,000 of them, and created what many consider the greatest driving Mustang in history. The recalls were embarrassing. The vibrations were real. The oil consumption was concerning, but that 8,250 RPM scream, that was pure magic. This is Car Chronicles, where we celebrate the cars that broke the rules and the corporations that occasionally got it right. If you want more stories of automotive brilliance or automotive disasters, smash that subscribe button. Drop a comment telling me, would you daily drive a GT350 knowing about the oil filter recall? And check out our latest episode on Supercar Chronicles, where we covered another flat plane masterpiece, this time from Italy. I'll see you in the next one.